Hey, what's going on, everybody? AJ Reilly here for another edition of The Corner. Ready to talk some baseball. We've got a series recap of the Tigers and the Rangers and an offense that actually hit the ball, which is mind-blowing, but almost also lost a 9-0 lead, which we'll get into. We're going to talk about Julio Rodriguez, who comes to town. We're going to preview that series, but also talk in the leadoff about the payday that he got over the weekend. Then I want to wrap up the show and talk about a slight improvement that I saw in some certain number for the Detroit Tigers that I think is at least a trend in the right direction. So I want to make sure that we get to all of that on the episode today. But before we get to that, I want to remind you that wherever you're at on social media, make sure you're following Detroit Sports Nation, wherever you're most comfortable. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It doesn't matter. We are there, and we're covering Detroit sports news and major news at large. Make sure that on YouTube you are hitting that subscribe button and click that bell so that you can get notifications of Detroit Sports Nation's latest content from our shows: Griffin and Bass, Fantasy Factory, Beyond the Box, Rain City Roar. Every show that we're producing content for, make sure that you're getting notified. It's some of the best content that you will find out there from some of the best guys around, names that will become very prominent very quickly. I guarantee you that. Let's jump into baseball and let's talk about the leadoff and this savvy new trend that is happening with organizations and their young superstars. And to be frank with you, it's a trend that I actually like in a lot of ways. You know, the Padres did it with Fernando Tatis Jr., suspension aside. The Braves have done it with Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, Austin Riley, even Matt Olson to a certain extent. 5 players that they have locked up into 6, 7, 8-year deals for very friendly money, but also big money for those guys. And it's this trend that also kind of has moved out west to Seattle. And given the recent, collective bargaining agreements and negotiations, this, I think, is something that can be seen that's good for both parties. Now, when you talk about it, you're like, how is this good for both parties? The teams that have signed these guys to massive contracts. Yeah, these players have signed massive contracts, but when we talk about the actual value that they are getting from the production of play, compared to the money that they could sign for, it actually is a team-friendly deal. And this deal, the deal with Julio Rodriguez over the weekend, is actually one of the crazier deals. I'm going to read some spot rack information. They've broken down the contract phenomenally, and we'll make sure that the link to that breakdown is in the description of the video as well. But basically, what you have is a deal that is 7 years for $119.3 million. Next year in 2023, Julio Rodriguez will make $4 million. Then the following season, $10 million. Then it goes up to the top number that he'll get paid per season of $18 million. Now, on top of this is a $15 million signing bonus. This basically covers his 2 team control years left and then 3 years of arbitration as well, which Spotrac says will ultimately pay him about $54 million for his arbitration years. They reference that to Aaron Judge, who will only make about $37.6 million. So Julio Rodriguez is getting paid more for his arbitration years based on what he did this season, and we'll talk about why that number actually kind of makes sense here in a minute. But aside from those 7 years, there's also these incentives or options that go after the 2029 season. So in 2030, the team has the opportunity to pick up an option for either 8 years or 10 years. So, and the term of that contract, the 8 years or 10 years is based upon MVP voting, but also the dollar amount in those options is also based upon MVP voting. So if he never picks up a single top 10 MVP vote from 2022 to 2028, then the club could pick up an option for 8 years at $200 million. If he gets 2 votes, it'd be 8 years, $240. 4 top 10 MVP votes, it would be 8 years at $260. If he wins an MVP and receives 1 other top 5 vote or 3 top 5 votes but no wins, it's an 8-year, $280 million option. If he wins 2 MVPs or receives 4 top 5 votes but no wins, it's a 10-year, $350 million. So when all things are said and done, at the very high end of this contract, it could be an 18-year deal. Now, if they don't pick up that option, he has a player option. He could pick up a player option that's around the 5-year, $90 million that would cover years 2030 through 2034. And those would be paid out at about $18 million per year. Now, it's crazy, all the what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? But the value in this contract is actually great for both sides. One, Julio Rodriguez gets paid. I mean, that's the number one benefit. Like, this dude is putting dollars on top of dollars, and things are fantastic for him. But even the Mariners make out pretty well in this deal. Yeah, there's a lot of money potentially committed to him. But right now, as it stands, after about 129 games, J-Rod's a 3.4 WAR player, which Fangraphs projects out would net him about $27.5 million in free agency, which averages out about, if 1 WAR being worth about $8.1 million. So the fact that next year he's getting $4 million and then $10 million in 24 and then $18 million from 25 to 29 is a savings for the Mariners if this production were to continue. And listen, I get it. There is risk involved, but this is not a bad approach to building a team. And the other thing is that it keeps these stars in the uniforms that we are used to seeing them in. Right? We talk about, there's no loyalty in sports anymore. People just jump from team to team, whoever pays them the highest. Okay, I get that. And how can you blame somebody for going and getting paid the most money in their respective profession? You can't. But these teams wisening up and going, you know what? Let's buy out their free agency and let's reward them. Taking the approach of the Braves, taking the approach of the Mariners. It's not necessarily a bad way to pay a team or build a team. Think about it as a fan of the Atlanta Braves. You know, for the next 6 to 7 years, you are seeing Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, Matt Olson, and Austin Riley. That core is not going to get broken up for the next 6 to 7 years. And then you have the potential of signing Dansby Swanson. Now, if you're a Mariners fan, you know that Julio Rodriguez, barring a trade, of course, is going to be in your uniform. When you have players that are this special, it is very important to lock them up. And it's a fantastic thing in the way that we let off this show. Because I think that this works out well for both players, even though fans will be like, oh, he hasn't done anything. Yeah, he's been a really good, he's a 20-20 guy, potentially even a 30-30 guy. Something that is very rare at this point in the game of baseball. 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases. Oh, he's only hitting 265. Let's not focus on average so much because of the value that he brings to this team. He hits leadoff. He hits for power in the leadoff position. He is a bona fide star. And he got paid like one. That's going to do it for the leadoff because J-Rod got paid. And J-Rod's actually coming to town this week for the Detroit Tigers. So we're actually going to get to see him play, and we'll get to that in the preview. But before we get to the preview, let's talk about the series that occurred in Texas. Another series win for the Detroit Tigers, who have not lost a series now since the middle of August. It's going on 2 weeks that they have not lost a series. They split with the Guardians, they beat the Angels, they split with the Giants, and now they beat the Rangers, which is actually improvement. And we said, you got to improve. That's all we're looking for over these next 5 weeks, right? You got to improve. You got to improve. You got to improve. That's it. Game 1 was rough, but it was within their grasp. Tyler Alexander, 3 innings pitched, 3 home runs given up, 7 total runs after 3 innings. But the offense clawed and scraped. They came back to within 1 run, left a guy on base at the end of the game, and lost 7-6. But I told you in the preview, this team does not strike out players often. The Rangers will not strike out hitters often. If you strike out too much, you will lose. Tigers struck out 11 times. They lost. Left 7 men on base. And I tweeted during one of the games, I don't know why anybody would not throw Javi Baez a slider every pitch, because he cannot hit the slider to save his life. It's almost unwatchable at this point. Again, I was not against the Javi Baez signing. We knew what we were getting. And hopefully there's an adjustment that's made for 2023, because this is not great. Out of the hand sliders, he's swinging and missing quite often. It's brutal. But we're not going to focus on the loss that we had, because in the next game, game 2, the Tigers won 11-2. 18 hits, 11 runs, 3 home runs, and Eduardo Rodriguez had a nice outing, but wasn't as crisp as his comeback against the Angels. He went 6 innings this time, gave up 1 earned run, walked 3, struck out 2. But the Tigers didn't really need a Herculean effort from him. They only needed what he gave them, because the offense came to play. Candelario hits a home run. Haas hits a home run. Just mashing the baseball. And then Sunday gets here, and the Tigers jump out to a 9-0 lead. Then they turn it over to Alex Lang to get some work. Alex Lang gives up 3 runs. Then they get Soto some work in the 9th. He also gives up 3 runs. It was 9-2 when Alex Lang came in the game. It was 9-8 when Soto left the game. They had to bring Jimenez in for the save after being up 9-0. It was a win. But it kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth a little bit, because you're like, you're 1 swing away from losing this game. But they didn't lose. And if ifs and nuts were candies, or if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd have a heck of a party. And they didn't lose. They did not lose. So we're not going to harp on it too much, but that's just a little, not great. But let's look at the series. Some notes, right? Candelario, who we've talked about quite a bit on the show, and whether or not he will have a spot on this team next year, he's auditioning these next 5 weeks for a contract next year, guaranteed. He's auditioning one way or the other for a contract, whether we non-tender him or not. But if he wants to remain in the Tigers uniform, his production over the next 5 weeks is going to matter a lot. He went 5 for 12 in the series, had 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, and did not strike out, which I think is significant. Victor Reyes, same kind of situation. Now, Victor Reyes has been putting together a lot better at bats, still not walking a ton, but he went 5 for 13, had 2 doubles, 2 walks, struck out 3 times. Hitting Harold Castro, 6 for 14, 6 RBIs, 5 of those RBIs in the game on Sunday. He only walked once, struck out 4 times. A lot better at bats. A lot better production from guys who need to produce in order to stay on this team next season. But it was a good series, and it was another series win. It's another notch in the belt there. Haven't lost a series since mid-August, and that's awesome. That's the type of improvement that you want to see from your ball club. Which brings us then to the opportunity to play spoiler against the Seattle Mariners. Julio Rodriguez, we broke down his contract earlier. Now he's coming to town and we get to see him play. But if you want to keep up that streak of not losing a series, it's going to be much tougher against Seattle. And you have to go into it with the mindset of spoiler. Because we've talked at length about the Seattle Mariners and their playoff run. We've talked about how they are right in the thick of it and have over a 90% chance, according to Fangraphs, for making the playoffs. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Tigers can spoil a little bit. Currently, Seattle only has a game lead over Toronto for the second wildcard spot. But that means that they have a 2.5 game lead over Baltimore to be in the playoffs, if that makes sense. They're a game and a half behind Tampa Bay. No, they're half a game back from Tampa Bay, I'm sorry. And they have a game up on Toronto, but they have a 2.5 game lead on Baltimore. So they're sitting pretty as far as the postseason race looks. But if they were to lose 2 out of 3 to the Tigers, and Baltimore wins 2 out of 3 in their next series, well, now they only have a half game lead on Baltimore. So it's getting tight. That playoff race is getting tight, and the Tigers have a prime opportunity to be a spoiler. And there's no, when your season is over, when you are not going to make the playoffs, there is no better position to be in than to be in the role of spoiler. So let's look at it, right? Pitching matchups. Game 1, Tuesday, 7 o'clock. It's going to be George Kirby versus Matt Manning. Now, George Kirby in his last 3 starts has gone 18 and a third innings. He's given up 6 runs, 21 Ks, and 2 walks. Generally, he strikes out about 9 per 9 innings, walks about 1.2, has a 3.19 FIP. Matt Manning, we all know, has been phenomenal. In his last 2 starts, he's given up 1 earned run in 13 innings. It's going to be a pitching duel. Runs are going to be hard to come by. You're going to notice that when we talk through this preview. It's going to be very important that they push runs across the plate. Game 1, Tuesday, is going to be could be a quick game, but it's going to be much like what we saw in Matt Manning and Patrick Sandoval from the Angels. 2 pitchers that can hurl and hopefully will shut down offenses. Game 2, Wednesday at 7:10. Marco Gonzalez faces off against Tyler Alexander. An opportunity for Tyler Alexander to rebound from some rough starts that he's had. In his last 3 starts, he's given up 13 earned runs in 14 innings. Not great, man. Not great. And against this offense, as we're going to talk about, a top 10 offense in baseball right now, this is a very, very iffy game. Alexander's going to be facing off against Marco Gonzalez, who is 9-12 on the season, has a 3.97 ERA. He only strikes out about 5 per 9, walks almost 3 per 9. But in his last 3 outings, he's gone 16 in the third innings and given up 7 earned runs. However, he's only given up 2 earned runs over his last 2 starts, which have lasted 11 in the third inning. So he's pitched much better the last 2 games out, and hopefully the Tigers can turn that fortune around for him and put the ball in play and create a little bit of havoc. The series finale is going to be Thursday at 1 o'clock. It's going to feature Logan Gilbert against Eduardo Rodriguez. Now, Gilbert's 10-5 with a 3.49 ERA and a 1.24 WHIP. In his last 3 starts, he's 17 in the third innings, 7 earned runs, and 11 Ks to go against 4 walks. Eduardo Rodriguez, since he's come back in 2 starts, has been good. He's gone 11 innings, only given up 1 earned run. He's had 7 Ks in that time, but also 6 walks, which is not great. Needs to clean up the control, needs to lower that walk rate significantly. So let's look at the Mariners, right? Let's talk about this series. What do they do well, and how can they, how do the Tigers even have a chance? Well, here's what they do well. They're a top 10 offense in baseball. They have a 10% walk rate, which is 3rd in the major leagues. They're 11th in the major leagues in home runs, and they have a 105 weighted runs created. So they're about 5% above major league average. Lineup features names, one that we might know, Eugenio Suarez, right? The infamous trade that we made for Alfredo Simon, and then we traded Eugenio Suarez to the Cincinnati Reds, and he just becomes a machine, right? Massive amounts of home runs over the last few years. They also have Julio Rodriguez, Mitch Haniger. They're tough outs. I watched their game against Cleveland. They strike out at about a 27-23% rate, so they do have a high strikeout rate, but when they put the ball in play, they hit it hard and they hit it far. They also are the sixth best defense. 41 defensive runs saved, 10 outs above average, which is 8th in the major leagues. And they have the 11th best bullpen. You get in the back end of that bullpen, and it is not pretty. Moreno, I think it is, that throws, a million miles per hour fastball, and then also can throw a slider in there, 91, 92, which is insane. They also have a guy named Castillo in the bullpen who has a very hard biting slider as well. What they necessarily don't do well, though, they're the 17th best starting rotation. So, it's important, especially the way that this lines up, right? Because we missed their two best starters in Castillo and Robbie Ray. So that's beneficial for the Tigers and the opportunity to maybe play spoiler. But they also have the 5th worst base running team in Major League Baseball. So the question is, do we have any chance? Well, the only chance that you have is to play clean baseball. You have to convert batted balls to outs and not give up home runs. You can't do what you did in the late innings against the Rangers and expect to win this. Saturday night, I watched their game against Cleveland. Seattle only scored on 3 solo home runs. And it ended up losing the game. They could not get to Zach Plesac, who we know we've gotten to this year. He's pitched a lot better than his record obviously would indicate, but he had shut them down quite well. If you want to win the series, you have to manufacture runs. You got to find ways to push runs across the plate, even if they aren't necessarily the analytical way to do it, right? If you need to bunt a guy to manufacture a run in a very close game, then you might have to do that. I understand the percentages. I understand the odds. I know that it's better to have a guy on second base with no outs than it is to have a guy on third base with 1 out. I understand the odds and the run expectancy. I get all that. But when you need to score runs, you got to find a way to score runs. It could be a very low-scoring series, so runs are definitely going to be at a premium. And we're going to see how this plays out. It's going to be very interesting and fun to see how this plays out as the Tigers look to play spoiler. So make sure you're tuning in. Make sure you are watching this series because you're going to get to see one of the best young guys in the game in Julio Rodriguez. You get to see an old friend in Eugenio Suarez. And hopefully you get to see the Tigers play a little bit of spoiler. So let's move to the peanut gallery and let's talk about one thing that I think the Tigers are improving on, and this will be quick because we talk about run differential often, and the teams with the best run differential are usually the best teams in the league, and the Tigers are way at the bottom, right? They're a horrible run differential this season. But in the first 92 games, which is the amount of games they played before the All-Star break, which Baseball Reference considers to be the first half, even though it's 11 games more than the actual halfway point, the Tigers had a negative 112 run differential, which is about a run a game. They have lowered that in these last 62 games to less than a half a run a game. The fact that their run differential is improving tells us two things. One, they're either not giving up as much runs or they're scoring much more runs in these last 36 games, which is important for a team that is historically inept at scoring runs. The fact that they are producing more runs and not giving up as many runs really helps to balance that out and really helps to level that out. I told you in the last episode of The Corner that what we're looking for in these last few weeks is just improvements. So we're going to try to drill down on numbers and look at how are they improving. Well, this is the first area that I can find. The run differential, and I understand 36 games compared to 92 is not the same. I get that. But it does show improvement. When you've dropped from about, a 1.2 runs per game differential to a 0.4 runs per game differential, yes, they're both still negative, and you would like to see that flip, but at least it's improvement. At least it's improvement. And we're working off of what Baseball Reference gave us, right? First half, 92 games. Second half is going to be less than that. I get it. But are you improving? We've seen, in this Texas series alone, the Tigers scored 26 runs in 3 games. 26 runs in 3 games. That's, if I do quick math, just over, let me do it because I am not going to sound like an idiot. It is 8.6 runs a game. You can win a lot of baseball games when you're scoring 8.6 runs a game. And that also helps with that run differential because hopefully, given the fact that you have the 4th best bullpen in Major League Baseball and your starters have not been terrible and have been really solid, especially given the names that you're running out there, 8.6 runs per game really should give you the opportunity to win a lot of baseball. So we're looking for improvements, right? And run differential is one that we're going to look at because it's going to tell us how well our offense is performing as opposed to how many runs our pitching staff and defense are giving up. And so right now, you have a marked improvement in run differential, and I just want to see something like that continue. Because the name of the game over these last few weeks is just simply going to be improvement. That's all that matters. Improvement. That is it. And that is going to be it for us here on The Corner. I am AJ Reilly, looking forward to that series against the Seattle Mariners because they're a good baseball team, and the Tigers have the opportunity to play spoiler. I do want to remind you again, wherever you're at on social media, make sure that you are following Detroit Sports Nation because we cover everything. And if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button, pound that bell, and click subscribe so that you can get your latest content from Detroit Sports Nation. And don't forget to follow The Corner on Twitter at DSN at The Corner. I am AJ Reilly. I'm going to be enjoying this series with the Seattle Mariners, and I will be with you on Thursday previewing the upcoming series. And until then, as always, go Tigers.